Hey, what's up? I just finished probably my last read of the year, so we're going to be doing an end of the year book tag. Yes, that's what we're doing. It's not a question. I got these questions from Larry Reads, and they're kind of crazy. I'm only doing one book per question, and I'm also gonna try to only use each book once. So like some books could go in multiple categories, but I just had to pick what I felt like fit that category the most. So let's get started. Okay, starting out strong with the most disappointing book of the year. I would say The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. I should preface this by saying usually I read fantasy and like sometimes sci-fi, and then like a rom-com as a palate cleanser, you know? My book club reads very different things. We all took turns each month picking the book for that month, and this was one of the books. The premise is like this guy in this town, when he was a kid, him and his friends were like, he like witnessed these. Wait, I'm actually making literally no sense. Just give me a second. I'll just look it up on Goodreads. So our main character, Eddie, is a kid in the 80s. It's very much already giving It by Stephen King. Him and his friends, you know, since it's the 80s, they don't have like cell phones or anything, so they communicate with like chalk men, like they draw chalk stick figures, and they all have a different color of chalk. Then as they're kids, these chalk drawings, they're like following them one day, and they think they're just like meeting their friend, but actually they find a dismembered body. Okay, that's crazy. I got chills. 96, 06, 16. Then we flash forward like 30 years in the future to 2016. Eddie is grown up, and then one day he gets a letter in the mail and it's a chalk figure. Okay, well, only he and his friends know about that, so literally who sent him this? Then, you know, he starts reaching out to all his friends. Did you guys get a message? I got this really weird message. They think it's a prank. And then one of them dies. And then from there, we go back and forth between the past and the future, trying to piece together like what really happened. Okay, so that sounds interesting, right? I was so disappointed. I gave it 2 stars, which was really low for me at the time. I wrote like the longest Goodreads review ever. Basically, I hated the narrator, and there were like so many plot holes that I was reading other reviews and everyone else was like, what happened with this? Who did this? There's so many things that it's like you never find out why they did it or who did it. And I'm like, that's the whole point of a thriller, is it not? That you have this mystery and then you spend the whole book like discovering who did it and like their motivations. I don't know, maybe that's not true. I don't usually read thrillers, so maybe I just wasn't the intended audience. The Chalk Man, my most disappointing read of the year. An underdog book. A book that going into, I didn't really have high expectations for, but it shocked me how good it was. And I think that would be The Prison Healer by Lynette, Noni. 5 stars, full body chills at the last chapter. Usually I read books. Like I actually read them, and I don't really listen to audiobooks because I just feel like I don't connect with the book as much. So usually if I don't know how I'm gonna feel about a book, or like I have to read it for my book club but I don't think I'm gonna like it, I'll just listen to it on Spotify. I listened to this book just because I wasn't really reading anything at the time and I saw that it was included in premium. Oh my gosh, this like a young adult fantasy. Our main character, 17-year-old Kiva Meriden. For 10 years, so since she was 7 years old, she's been in this notorious death prison called Zalendov, and she has been their prison healer, like the doctor of the prison. The rebel queen, like of this world, comes, like, is captured by the society. And so of course she's put into like the best prison. Okay, well, the prison healer is charged with keeping her alive because she's like unconscious, and the high up guards are like, no, they want to keep her alive so that she can do these like trial by ordeal is what it's called, like these life or death challenges, and they want the rebel queen to do it. They don't want her to just die an easy death, you know? So they're like, okay, Kiva, keep her alive, please. Thank you. And after the rebel queen arrives, her family sends a message. Keep her alive. Oh, I'm getting chills. I'm getting chills. Don't let her die. We are coming. Kiva is like, oh my God, why? Why do I have to keep her alive? Can you get here like literally any day now? Her only option is to take the place of the rebel queen, who she doesn't really care about, but like, her life is kind of on the line too. And so then the whole thing is like Kiva getting through these trials. There is like a little bit of romance with another prisoner who's kind of like helping her out. And like, it's like something's moving, like something's brewing within the prison and the rebels. And Kiva's like, I know that like something big is happening. I just need to get out of here before it happens. I just need my family to come get me out. Like, I don't know how they're going to do it, but she believes in her family. I only call it an underdog book because I really haven't heard that many people talk about it, and they need to be talking about it. An overhyped book that I read, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Don't hate me. You've definitely heard about this book. It went so viral this year. Everyone was just talking about how amazing it was. And like I said, it was good. I won't get into like the plagiarism copycat issues that people are bringing to light recently. As someone who has read both Red Queen and Hunger Games, I was just excited to like have a new like fantasy story to read. It was kind of marketed as being inspired by Hunger Games and Red Queen, so I wasn't shocked when it was very similar. I thought it was overhyped because it was like fan fiction. Like, the world building did not exist. In my Goodreads review, I literally wrote, this book was like the Hunger Games if the romance was the main plot and the rebellion was the side plot. In parentheses, which 12-year-old me would have eaten up, end parentheses, but 24-year-old me would have liked some more world building. The world was really interesting. Questions that I had: what determines mundane power versus elite power? Does the king rule everything? Is there a world outside of this kingdom? Like, why were the trials even started? What are the rules? Because if you win an event, you like don't even win the whole thing, and what is the purpose of the voting? I gave it 3 stars, and I did think it was impressive for a debut novel until people started bringing up all of the plagiarism, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense that like the only good parts were parts that were stolen from other books. Anyway, overhyped book, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Still fun though, and I know a lot of people love it, and I do think it would be good for you if you haven't read Red Queen or Hunger Games, or I think there's like a couple other books that people said it's really similar to. I think if you hadn't read those, you could read this and then read those and be like, oh my gosh, this is like everything I loved in Powerless, but done so much better. A book that surprised you. Don't hate me for this, let me explain, okay? Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I didn't really know until this year that there was like a cult following for Brandon Sanderson. Like, I didn't realize he was like so beloved by so many people of so many different ages, because my little brother reads Brandon Sanderson. Like, last year, my family literally, we all pitched in and we got him the GoFundMe thing that they were doing where you got like a mystery box every month. My brother has been begging me to read these books for years, and I was like, Johnny, you like them, so I'm not gonna like them. I thought it was gonna be really high fantasy meets sci-fi that I would not even be able to understand and comprehend. I knew that it was like metals, like metal alchemy powers, and I was like, ugh, there's gonna be a lot of explanation as to how these metals work, and that feels really sciencey, and I'm not in the headspace for that right now. But then of course I read it and I was like, wow, this is really, really good. Actually, I listened to it because I didn't think I was gonna like it, and then I ended up really, really liking it. If you're my little brother, thank you so much. Okay, next, your favorite. I'm getting like giddy just thinking about that. Your favorite book couple of the year. Of course, that has to be Evangeline and Jax from Once Upon a Broken Heart. I made a whole TikTok when I first finished this trilogy, just like screaming about how much I love these books. I didn't read a lot of romance this year, and this is obviously a fantasy romance. I mean, oh my god, what do I even say? It's by Stephanie Garber in the world of Caraval. These two characters were just so amazing together. Evangeline is a girl. She is like so in love with the idea of love and having like this perfect, lovely fairy tale romance that oh my god, I'm doing such a horrible job at like explaining these characters. Jax, in this world, he's been alive for a minute and he has these powers. She goes to him. Oh my god, I don't even know. I just loved everything about them. I loved their dynamic. I love both of their characters separately and I loved them together. I don't even know how to explain. It's just like the feelings that I have for these characters. I can't put into words. My favorite main character of the year. I would go with Elspeth Spindle from One Dark Window. I am really proud because this was my book club pick. It's a gothic fantasy. There is magic in the world. Magic is in the form of these like cards. Like there are playing cards that can do different things. Like there's one playing card that like makes you really fast and like a little bit stronger. And so like the Royal Guard uses those cards called the Black Horse. There is a card called the Nightmare that like you can talk into someone's mind, like telepathically communicate to them and things like that. And so in this kingdom, little kids could come down with an illness that if they survive, they have magical abilities, but it is slowly like eating away at them. So to fix this, the king was like, okay, well, if you are a kid and you come down with this illness, I'm just gonna kill you. Yeah, so the only way to use magic is cards, because if you survive the illness and you have magic, oh wait, you're dead. Our main character, Elspeth Spindle, she has a monster living inside of her mind. I think the reason that I liked her character so much is because she literally isn't a fighter. She doesn't have any of the skills that I feel like a lot of main character young girls in fantasy have, where it's like, oh, I'm like a young poor girl, but I'm so strong and I can beat you up and I'm so brave and like I'm always good at making decisions and I always know what to do when I'm a planner and a fighter and a leader. Like, she's kind of none of that. She is just a regular girl who is really trying to like keep her head down low. Like if anyone found out that she had a monster in her head, they'd be like, oh my god, that's like magic, we're killing you. So no one can find out. So she doesn't make big decisions. She doesn't train to fight. Like she is just trying to peacefully live her life until her circumstances kind of no longer allow her to do that. But she's also so interesting because she has a monster living in her head. Her internal monologue is like her and the monster. So it's like a 2-for-1. And it's just so interesting. The story was also so thought out, so good. My girl Elspeth is probably my favorite main character of the year. Piggybacking off of that last book, my new favorite author of the year, Rachel Gillig, author of One Dark Window. It's like a duology. It's One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. And now that I have read and devoured and absolutely loved both of those books, I can say she's a new fave author because I am going to read The Night and the Moth, or whatever it's called, purely based on the fact that she wrote it. And I trust her. I trust her to write a good, moody, gothic fantasy world with world building that makes sense, rules that make sense, a magic system that makes sense. At my ripe age of 25, I'm craving world building. I'm craving logical magic systems. I'm craving good villains, good character development, like twists and turns that make sense, like a really solid plot. And I feel like my girl Rachel can deliver that. An author that didn't work out for you this year. This is painful. This is actually so painful to say, but Holly Black, I love the Cruel Prince trilogy. Then she put out a duology set in the same world as Cruel Prince. The Stolen Heir follows one character a girl, and then the prisoner's throne follows another character, a boy, Oak, from The Cruel Prince, like all grown up. It's a duology, so like logically it makes sense that, you know, you have two main characters, one of them gets a book and the other one gets a book. The first book was kind of boring in the head of the girl until the very end, and then it finally got so interesting, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the next book to like be in her head and see what she's thinking, like while she's doing what she's doing. And then we're not in her head, we're in Oak's head, and it's like back to being boring again. So yeah, I'm sorry, Holly Black. I still love her writing. I can see why people like these books, and I can objectively say that like Holly Black is a good author. I love the world that she's made. This specific isolated story was not for me, and that's okay. But that is why she was like a bit of a disappointment to me this year. Okay, the happiest book that I read this year, Snowed In by Catherine Walsh. Leading up to Halloween, I was really in like a dark, gothic, creepy book fantasy phase. And so then to get in the Christmas spirit, I was like, okay, I need like a fun Christmassy rom-com. And this was exactly what I needed. It's exactly what I wanted. There wasn't like big third act drama, misunderstanding. It was just these two characters falling for each other over the story. While they're in Ireland, it's snowing. They get snowed in. They're doing Christmas activities, Christmas with the family. It was just very good, happy, fun, Christmassy rom-com vibes. And that's kind of all I have to say about it. So thank you, Catherine Walsh, for Snowed In. The saddest book I read this year, Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I thought this was a rom-com. I was promised love and a dynamic love story that would restore anyone's faith in love. And actually, I personally got triggered by a huge part of the plot. I just cried a lot. This was a book club read. We read it for February thinking it was going to be like a fun rom-com book, and yeah, I was actually like sobbing at the end, and I was like, okay, well, this book isn't for me. I won't tell you what happens, but if you've read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like the part of the plot that the whole story revolves around, once it's finally revealed, I was like, this is really so sad and upsetting. And I didn't want to read something sad and upsetting. I thought I was reading a fun rom-com, and then I was hit with that. So anyway, yeah, that was the saddest book of the year. Next, most frustrating book I read this year, Tender is the Flesh. This was another book club pick. I didn't vote for it. It was the December book. We should have been reading a Christmas rom-com, but instead we were reading a book about cannibalism. The premise is interesting. Future Earth, the animals all had like this disease, and so they either died or like we had to kill all the animals basically. And because of course people wouldn't just go vegan if there was no meat available, of course we start farming humans. Anything that we do to animals in our world is being done to humans in this futuristic world. They're being farmed. There's like processing plants for human meat, like how people raise chickens. You can raise humans. It's like so disgusting. But I was like, okay, yeah, this book is going to be disgusting, but it kind of felt like going in, I thought it was going to be like something you would read in like an AP English class. We're at least going to have some interesting discussions about like the world and veganism and things like that, right? Like there'll be some cool social commentary in this book, right? Wrong. I felt like it was just gory for the sake of being gory, and like shocking for the sake of being shocking. I do not need authors to spell out everything for me. Like I think as readers, we need to be using context clues, reading in between the lines, practicing our media literacy, and like making connections for ourselves and like coming up with opinions by ourselves. I don't need to be spoon-fed information basically. Like you don't have to slap me in the face with your point. But this book didn't have a point. Like the author wasn't trying to say anything. She was literally just like, what if we like farmed humans instead of animals? And then she just spent the whole book like explaining in detail how that would work. And she wasn't like saying anything about it. So yeah, 1 star. That is the lowest rating I've ever given a book in my life. But I had to finish it because it was for book club. But also a lot of people on like Goodreads really liked it. So maybe it just wasn't for me. Well, I know that it wasn't for me, but obviously some people liked it. So it was just It was just frustrating for me. Okay, best book adaptation of the year. This was really tough because unfortunately the only book adaptation that I saw where I had also read the book was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. And there's lots of drama and controversy with that right now. I did watch The Uglies and I liked that, but I've never read The Uglies book, but I know that it's based off of a book. We could just go to 2023, where I read and watched The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, and that was a wonderful book to movie adaptation. One of the best I've ever seen, probably. Thank you. What's her name? I can only think of Colleen Hoover. Who wrote The Hunger Games? Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Thank you, Suzanne Collins. My favorite cover of the year. Okay, I actually have the physical book of this. For our last book club meeting of the year, we did like book club Secret Santa. So everyone drew someone else's name and you had to buy them a book that you think they would like. Okay, so I was given We Who Paved the Milky Way by Hal Arnold. And I actually just finished reading it and it was very interesting, but look at that cover. When I opened it, I was like, wow, this book is so beautiful. I love the colors. I love that it's like a city. It's kind of like, it's not like Star Wars, but it is like different species on different planets and like interplanetary travel. You're kind of discovering the history of how the whole galaxy, like why it is the way that it is, and like the history of how it became like that. I just finished it this morning. It was pretty good. When I opened the cover, I was like, this is gorgeous. So I'm really happy that I have the physical book. Thank you to my Secret Santa who gave that to me. A book I haven't stopped thinking about, Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. This is the second book in the Red Rising series. I read Red Rising last year and then I literally got 75% through this book, which is the second book in the series, and I stopped for some reason. I don't know what happened. You know, 75% is where things really start to get crazy. You're nearing the climax. You're in the rising action of the book. And I just like stopped. And then I think like last month I started listening to it on audiobook and like kind of reading it back and forth at the same time. And it was so good. Of course I got all the way through it. The reason that I can't stop thinking about it is because every time I read a sci-fi book, after reading that one, I can't help but compare it to Golden Sun. I'm only 2 books into the Red Rising series, but it is like crazy for me to think about the fact that that is not a real world, that doesn't like these characters don't exist, and like that actually isn't our world. Like we don't have the color caste system, like we don't have reds and golds and pinks, like we're all just people. Everything is just so detailed and also so like logical. It's just crazy. So yeah, I haven't stopped thinking about it because I keep comparing every book I've read since to it. Oh, an unpopular book that I loved. Okay, this isn't unpopular in the world, but it was unpopular in my book club. Only me and one other person even finished the book. Everyone else stopped before the coffee gets cold. This is a critically acclaimed book. Everyone's heard of it. It's 4 short stories, and so basically everyone else in the book club, even the person who picked this book, didn't read past the first story, and I was like, how? I love this. I think I gave it 4 stars. I can't read books like this all the time or else I'll have an existential crisis and be like super depressed. But every once in a while, I do want to read a book that makes me question like life and death and human relationships. It did exactly what I was expecting it to do. There's this little coffee shop and you have the ability to travel through time at this one particular table if you follow like this set of rules, and they pour you coffee, but you have to be back before the coffee gets cold. Otherwise, you're trapped. All the like engineers in my book club were like, I wanted to know how it worked. Like, how did this happen? That didn't make any sense. And I was like, with books like this, the main part of the story is not like how you go back in time. It's like why. And the characters are the main part of the story, and what that's like, how that is a reflection on you and like how you interpret it. I'm like, you don't get it. You don't get the literary fiction the way that I get the literary fiction. I liked it, but it was unpopular to the people that I know in real life. The sun is really setting. Okay, book you thought you'd love, but you didn't. Secret History by Donna Tartt. I'm sorry. Again, it was probably because I listened to the audio and I'm just not as invested, but like it was a little boring for like the whole first half. And then the big thing happened. And then I was in. but also it was just like weird. It just wasn't what I was expecting, I guess, because everyone loves this book so much. I guess I was just expecting something else. That's kind of all I can say. I think I read this like towards the beginning of the year, so I don't like super remember. The vibes were definitely there. Like the dark academia vibes were definitely there. I understand why people like it, and I thought that the writing was really good. I just thought that like a huge chunk of it was boring, and also I hated lots of the characters. I've been seeing TikToks where people are like bringing a lot of things to light that I didn't pick up on the first read, so maybe someday I'll revisit it and try again with this new information. Book with the most unique concept you read this year. Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrews. I should literally just read you like what this book is about because it was also really good. This was in my like creepy gothic fantasy era. Yeah, my review literally just says this was exactly what I needed it to be. So good and crazy twist. Good ending, but also heartbreaking. Sad face. Our main girl, Wyatt, has just inherited a farmhouse where she grew up and it used to be her dad's, and she has like some trauma related to it and her dad. So she goes back to the farmhouse to burn it all down. And as she's walking around inside, oh my gosh, there's a boy chained up in the basement. And it's her childhood friend, Peter. What? I went into this book knowing only that sentence that I just said. And now that I'm reading the Goodreads description, it like tells you a lot. So I'm not going to tell you anything else. Wyatt has to like discover why Peter's there. Together, they kind of unravel family secrets. And it's like really, really crazy. And also there's a little bit of romance. A little bit of a love triangle, if you could call it that. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. But yeah, if you're gonna read it, I would go in knowing nothing. Like literally only go in with what I just told you. Books you read this year that you would reread. The Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by Stephanie Garber. I didn't really talk about this before because I was talking about the characters of Evangeline and Jack. So it's in the same world as Caraval. If you don't want the ending of Caraval spoiled for you, you should read that trilogy first. But I didn't. I read the first Caraval book, which was good, so I understood the world. And then I read this, and I'm gonna go back and read the last 2 books in the Caraval trilogy anyway. We follow Evangeline Fox. She grew up on legends about immortals, like the Prince of Heart. She learns that the love of her life is about to marry someone else, so she finds the Prince of Hearts and is like, literally, please, I'll do anything if you just stop this wedding because I know that he is like in love with me. And the Prince of Hearts is like, okay, yeah, I want 3 kisses. She's like, you want me to kiss you? He's like, no, I want 3 of your kisses and I might ask for them at any time. So like in the future, he could be like, oh, kiss that person, and she'd have to do it 3 times. She's like, yeah, literally, whatever. After Evangeline's first promised kiss, she learns that the Prince of Hearts wants far more from her than she's pledged, and he has plans for Evangeline that will either end in the greatest happily ever after or the most exquisite tragedy. Yeah, I would read this again. My review on this was, this book was amazing. I haven't devoured a book like this since The Cruel Prince or The Hunger Games. That tells you all that you need to know. That Evangeline is a really great character because in most fantasy books, like I kind of mentioned earlier, the girls are like fighters and they're really strong and tough and like leaders. But Evangeline literally isn't. She believes in love and she just wants to fall in love and like live a fairy tale, and she doesn't fight. She definitely grows and she learns more about the world, I would say. Good reads, reading goal reflection, and a reading goal for 2025. For 2024, my reading goal, I don't really set reading goals. I feel like if I set a goal to be like, I want to read 100 books, reading will feel like a chore instead of like an enjoyable hobby. Like I read to take a break from the rest of my life and to like escape the world that I live in. I do have the very difficult goal of reading 12 books every year. That's kind of what I always set. This year, I think I read 28 books. It doesn't really sound like a lot, but I'm like, that's like a little bit more than 2 books a month, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. We're down to the final 2 questions. A book you wish you got to this year. I do actually have 2. The first one is The Poppy War. I was listening to the audiobook and I got I think like halfway through, and then I stopped. But I just haven't, like, I downloaded it, but I just haven't started it yet. But I'm going to read that trilogy because I know it's amazing. And I read Babel by R.F. Kuang this year as well, and I just know that I'm gonna love Poppy War. I just think because I know that I like it, I'm like subconsciously putting it off. But I'm gonna do it this year. And then also the Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Onyx Storm comes out next month. Obviously, I've just like been interested in reading other things. Like I've been out of that world for too long that I'm like, I don't really need to read it right now, but I am going to try to read it like first book of the year so that I can be there when Onyx Storm like hype is happening, because I really liked Fourth Wing. I love dragons and it was just fun, so I'm excited to see what they do with the story. I heard that Iron Flame has a lot more world building than the first book, and as we know, I'm in my world building era, so I'm excited to see what they do with that. Final question: what will you prioritize in your 2025 reading year? I really am so bad about finishing series. Like, even with TV series, I will just get to like the last season and stop right before the last episode. Don't ask me why. I just don't want the good times to end. There's a lot of series that I started in 2021 and 2022 when I was first reading that I never finished. I feel like I love the first book in a series so much because I just love the excitement of being in like a whole new world with all new characters and a new magic system, and I just love learning about new worlds and like being introduced to new worlds and new characters. And then sometimes I think the excitement kind of wears off as the series continues, but I need to go back. I need to just force myself to finish. So yeah, Throne of Glass, Red Queen, Red Rising, Iron Flame, We Hunt the Flame, literally so many more I'm going to try to go back to and either finish or continue. That's my goal for the year. And just like that, we're done with the book tag. Wow, I actually talked for so long, and did I even say anything? I got all of these questions from Larry Reed's her video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope I could give you some good books that maybe you'll want to read in 2025. Comment down below the best book you read this year so that we can all get some good recommendations, and make sure to like and subscribe for more book content. I have lots of fun videos planned for 2025 with books, movies, all the good vibes. I will see you guys next time. Bye.